I just recently changed my Twitter handle to Jennifer Accidental Activist Warrior Mom
Hmm.
because I have you heard that term before? Accidental activist? I hadn't.
It's what I've been thinking of myself as for the last 5 years.
Right? Well, the woman that I was on, Dr. Phil, with coined it for me. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so perfect. Because I never expected to be an activist of any kind. I also never expected to be homeschooling. Uh, Never thought I would be doing that.
Oh,
But here
wow.
I am.
Okay.
Yeah,
Quite a journey then.
it's really been, yeah, quite a, I mean, everything, the whole kit and caboodle. I mean, just the way I think about everything now, my whole world has been turned upside down in the last couple of 3 years, 2, 3 years.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, just like I'm a historical liberal. I'm from, Washington, the west side of the mountains.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know what I am anymore. I mean, I'm politically homeless, I guess. That's what I say
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
people.
When did this disruptive journey begin?
It started in 2019, early end of 2019, early 2020. And that is when my daughter, well, I mean, it had been going on for a little while, and that she identified as transgender, but she went through all kinds of other things before she landed on that,
Hmm.
all kinds of other identities. And it really actually took her a little over a year to get there. Um, it was after she had been to an animation class, and she got in this online drawing forum. And that's where she learned about all these different identities, which at the time, I didn't even really, I mean, I didn't know. I thought it was kind of all sort of a bit silly, but also just kind of developmentally appropriate identity exploration. Um, but I
Was
didn't.
she 12, 14, 14, 16, 16, 18?
Oh, okay. So when this started, she was 9, 10, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So she's on the younger side of the kids that this is happening with. Um, but she learned these things in this online drawing forum. Um, and, uh, then she kind of just ran with it. And I think actually there were some older girls in this drawing forum. And I think she kind of looked up to them. And so she was emulating what she thought was, like being an edgy teen uh, at first. But then also, I think um, she was a tomboy. She is a tomboy. She's not a girly girl. She never was. She is my third child, and I was waiting for a girl. Like I couldn't wait to have a girl, me and my mother both. And like we dressed her up, and we wanted to get her dolls and all the girly stuff because we hadn't had a chance to do that, and she just wasn't interested in any of it. Um, and she was always kind of trying to keep up with her brothers. So that I don't know how that played into all of this. I mean, definitely because she didn't feel like she was girly, and girls are being told that if you're not a girly girl, then, you must be a boy, which is just crazy and pretty stereotypically regressive. I mean, I don't know if you remember the Free to Be You and Me. Did you listen to that as a kid?
No,
Oh, well,
I
I
was doing
listened to
Music
it.
Machine back then.
Oh, I don't know that. I don't know that
We're
one.
different
And
cultures.
yeah, okay. Well, but I think we're the same generation.
Yeah.
I'm just a little bit older than you. But
Mm.
anyway, I am.
Uh,
Um,
maybe.
But anyway, I am. I know I am. But anyway, yeah, Free to Be You and Me, where it was like, William had a doll. So like everybody, William had a doll, but which is okay for a boy, right? And Atalanta, who ran with all the men, raced them so that she didn't have to marry a man, she won. Anyway, all these things that we learned from that, like in the 70s, you can be a woman and be any kind of woman you want to be, or you can be a man and be sensitive and take care of kids, whatever, be a ballet dancer. It's like we're unlearning all of that stuff now. I don't understand how people don't see that that's what's happening.
Well, I mean, not to put my own thoughts in here, I don't know how far away we can get from the
I know.
pressures of gender or the social manifestation of sex types. I don't think we can discount them entirely without them coming back with a vengeance, but that's just my own biases. That's one way of reading what's happening now, but for whatever reason, we're in a different era, and it's being taken not even just literally, but medically to a whole other level with regard to the feelings of gender and expression and the outcomes of how we deal with that. So when your daughter was presented these ideas at 9 and 10, did she, start dressing like a boy, start like using a deep voice when she walked around, or?
Yes, she did a little bit, actually. She kind of sauntered a little bit more. And she cut her hair. She started dressing, and she still likes to shop in the boys department, which honestly, don't have an issue with. Some of the girl stuff is a little too hoochie mama, like,
oh, yeah.
I'm totally fine with her.
There's that too.
Wearing, right. With wearing baggy clothes and I like cargo shorts and stuff too, so.
You don't need a slutty mall ninja running around the house. That's for certain.
No, I'm glad that she's not going that direction. But yeah, she kind of, she did the haircut. It's kind of like there's a costume that they all do, I think. Mm-hmm. And yes, she was appropriating that.
So the toned down colors, muted tones, baggy things, but not really sporty things.
No, not sporty. She's she's an artist, she's not, she is athletic, but she's mostly like an artist, and she's kind of, she was always kind of different, interest in a great way. Right. Mm-hmm. But, I feel like it was, I'm sure this has been said by other people, but it's kind of like the new emo, or goth or whatever.
Well, I was going to think it's probably more like trans man grunge.
Yeah.
Not so much like.
Kind of. Yeah. Yeah. That's funny.
So it started with the dressing, and then hold on a second. I have a cat. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
How did it start manifesting?
Well, it started with her look, and she was. I knew she was like calling herself all these different things, like aromantic, and demisexual and non-binary, which is one that I had actually heard of before. So I knew what it was at the time. But I didn't and then she ended up on transgender at the beginning of 5th grade. And she actually came out to her class and her teacher, unbeknownst to us. We didn't know this. And nobody said anything to us about it. That's part of my story, is that the school and this therapist that she ended up seeing were socially transitioning her behind our backs. They were deceiving us. I can't really put it any nicer than that, because that's how I feel. That's what I feel happened. And that's what I feel is happening to lots. I mean, it is happening to lots of parents. There's just no question about it. Um, so they were using male pronouns for her in the class. That was something, a lot of the things in our story, I only know in retrospect. Like at the time, I didn't know what was happening. I knew that she had a new nickname because her teacher at the beginning of the year sent home like an email to me using that name, and which at first I was thinking it was, he had the wrong parent, because I didn't know who this person was. And then I went to her room and I saw that she had written this name and the words they, them on her dresser. And so I said, "Do you have a new nickname?" And she said yes. And I said, "Okay, that explains it." But I thought it was weird that this teacher didn't just kind of say, "Hey, she wants to be called this name."
Yeah.
Sort of, it was weird that he didn't introduce that, he's not even talking to her; he's talking to me, and
Yeah.
it was bizarre.
So she's 10, 11 in fifth grade when this.
So she was 10 when fifth grade started.
Okay.
And then a few months into the year, I got a call from the school counselor saying that she had used the words cutting and suicide with a friend. And so, of course, I was concerned. And this counselor really sold the idea to me to utilize this therapist that was contracted with the school, was actually with one of the local hospitals here, but was contracted with the schools, and that she specialized in these kinds of situations. And, she was really great. She would be free. She was, at the school, so it would be very convenient. And because our daughter was, and I only know this now too, but because our daughter was under 13, I had to come in and sign a form allowing her to speak to her. At 13, I might not have even known. I likely actually wouldn't have even known because I don't know if you know about all the laws in our states, but they're pretty bad.
Yeah, for parents. So I was just going to wonder, were they documenting? Was the school documenting all this stuff? And do you as a parent have access to these documentations?
That is a very good question. I requested all the information that, that they have on her, and all they gave me, I did get documents from the therapist, which were very upsetting. But so I did get those much, much, much later. But I did request documents from the school district and from the principal, and all they gave me were transcripts, like for grades and performance. So I don't know if I didn't ask in the right way, or if there's some other place they have information. I mean, I have heard that one of the ways they get around having to give this information to parents, or being able to take notes on things without parents being able to know, is to have it be in a teacher's notes. And they're like, well, these are the teacher's notes. They're not part of, their file. I think technically that's, that is not legal. I think they still have to let you know everything that they have on your child. So I don't know. I mean, maybe they don't have anything but transcript. I really don't know. Mm-hmm. But I did get, a few months after this all happened, I got the notes from the therapist, which I requested several times, like right after. And it took her a few months to get them to me. And when I read them, I understood why.
Was there falsehoods about you, or?
Well, yeah. I mean,
coaching?
Yes. Yes and no. It was I think it's the way things were framed. But let me just tell you how, I think I need to back up for a minute, because she saw this therapist. I came in, I said at the time, I know, before she first started seeing her, I said, I know that she's been experimenting with her sexuality and her identity. And, she's very young. Her father and I think she's too young to know these things, but we're going to love her no matter where she ends up with them. And honestly, at that time, I didn't really know what transgender meant or what it led to. I didn't really understand it, honestly, because I thought it had to do with sexual attraction, which clearly I know now it really doesn't have anything to do with that. But so she saw this therapist, and by the way, that therapist didn't say to me at that time that she didn't agree with me on any of that. She never said, well, this is my philosophy and this is how I will treat her. You know, she never said anything about that. So she saw her for 2.5 months for half-hour sessions once a week. So a total of 5 hours she saw our daughter. And she called us right before the pandemic, and she called me actually and said she was using male pronouns and the new made-up name, and was telling me that she wanted to set up a meeting to help our daughter come out to us as a boy. She was giving us 3 days to process this. She's like, I know this is difficult to deal with, and I'm, so that's why I'm calling you now before we have this meeting. And so she thinks 3 days is good enough time. Also, I had been asking her throughout the sessions, because of course I was concerned about what was going on with our daughter, what they were talking about, which, because my daughter was under 13, I had the legal right to know. And there's reasons for that, but anyway, so she was going to help her come out to us as a boy. And by the way, she wants to be in the boys' cabin for 5th grade camp. So, which I had apparently, in order for her to do that, she would have to officially transition with the school, which I guess just means signing a paper. I actually still don't really know how you do that, but that was never going to happen. We were never going to allow her to be in the boys' cabin, an overnight situation for camp. And actually, I found out later, I found out very recently, because I have since talked to my daughter about everything that happened, or at least a lot of it. And I asked her about where she got the idea to be in the boys' cabin. And she said, it wasn't my idea. That was the school's idea. My teacher asked me. And I was like, you're kidding me, because it had been presented to me as though she came to the counselor or the therapist that she saw and asked and requested that. I mean, I didn't even know that this was a discussion that she was having with her teacher. That's part of the most egregious part of this story. Well, those two people, actually, her teacher, who's a male, asking her to be, if she wants to be in the boys' cabin, in an overnight situation with him and with boys, which is, there's so many things wrong with that. First of all, she didn't feel like she could answer how she actually felt. She said to me, I didn't want to be in the boys' cabin. I wanted to be with my friends, the girls. And she didn't feel like she could say that to him because she had already committed to this whole idea that she was a boy. And when he asked her that question, she felt like she had to answer yes. And so shortly after that, she said, I don't even want to go to camp. Can I not go to this camp? And I was like, that's fine with me. But I didn't know at that time, that her teacher had been the one to ask her. I would have been a lot more upset had I known.
So that piece of information came bundled with 3 days to process that your girl is now a boy, according to this counselor.
Yes, the therapist.
All right. Were you given an option or survey? A threat?
Yeah. I didn't even know how to respond to her at the time that I was on the phone with her. So this wasn't an email either. So there's no paper trail for this whole conversation, which is, I think, also interesting. But anyway, she called, she talked to me about that. I at first I said, okay. And I was with my husband and we were with other family members and I couldn't really talk about what was happening. And I just said, can you do a meeting on Friday with, the therapist? And he was like, okay. And then later we talked about it, and actually he freaked out at first that when he knew that she was using male pronouns.
Who's he?
My husband.
Okay.
My husband did. Sorry. And the reason that he did, and I didn't know this at the time, I actually thought he was kind of going overboard at the time. I was like, I don't think they're trying to do anything. And, they're not trying to make her anything or anything like this. But he had a good friend who this had already happened to. And their daughter was old enough to, she was over 13. So all the laws in our state that make it dangerous for children over 13, applied to them. And they ended up moving out of our state. And I actually know a lot of people who have done that. But, and their daughter has desisted, by the way. They pulled her out of all the influences and she has desisted, which is part of our story as well. But anyway, he knew these things that I didn't know. And so he had kind of a strong reaction to this. And he actually pulled me back from even having much discussion with this therapist because he had looked her up. He knew she had a social worker background, and he knew some things about that were concerning, and that she might be keeping notes on us and all this stuff. And so he pulled me back from really questioning very much, giving them very much information. Though I did say to her, this doesn't make any sense to me. She just had a sleepover with a bunch of girls. I don't know why she would want to be in a cabin with a bunch of boys. And I was like, and I think I'm kind of wondering if this isn't a cry for attention. And the therapist, there were several other observations I made and I conveyed to her, and she never really, it was like it was like I was speaking into the void, she didn't have any response to any of my observations about my child. Somehow she knew in the 5 hours that she had been with my child, she knew her better.
She's an expert.
So, 5 hours. I mean, come on. Anyway, so after that, I was uncomfortable. She was making me very uncomfortable. The way she was responding or not responding to me. The whole idea of setting up a meeting where she was going to help our daughter present something like that to us I thought put us in an adversarial position with our daughter. She was the rescuer from us. She's the savior, right? And we were just like, no, we're not going to do that. So we canceled the meeting. And our daughter was upset about that at the time. This was something that took us time to recover from as a family. And that's very typical as well. When I say this, what's typical and what's not typical, I do that because I am now in touch with thousands and thousands of other parents who are going through this. And I'm in a lot of support groups. I actually am a co-founder of an org that is fighting the medicalization of children. It's called partnersforethicalcare.com. And through all of these avenues, I have a pretty decent awareness of what's happening now with parents and with their kids. Anyway, so where in the story was I? I get lost in the story all the time.
We were moving toward getting those counselor notes, so-called.
Mm-hmm.
But
The
we
notes.
can concentrate on you pulled her out of this meeting. She's upset. Was there blowback from the therapist or the school for denying your child her natural right to change her entity?
Not really. I
Okay.
think actually this therapist she realized she had done something wrong. And she did say something to me about her superior saying that she hadn't, I'm not sure the exact words, but to the effect that she hadn't brought us along on this journey, like that she hadn't included us and she hadn't. And I'm not sure that, I question whether or not that would be a concern. I don't know. The fact that she was under 13 again, I think put them in a position. I actually think what she did was illegal, technically illegal. And we really were getting ready to sue her, and we talked to a lawyer. But when we did, we were having a hard time finding somebody we have a friend who's a lawyer, and he was helping us, but we were having a hard time finding somebody who would represent us. And it seemed like because we were in a very liberal area there's very liberal judges and lawyers, that the cards might be kind of stacked against us. And I was like, we're in uncharted territory here too. Like at that time, I hadn't heard of anybody suing for something like this. Now there are people doing it. But I wasn't aware of that at the time. And we were concerned actually that somehow this would allow the government to reach into our home and get our child. There's a lot of fear around that with all of the parents that I talk to, that I know people who have had CPS called on them. That occurred to me before I even knew that it had happened to anybody, but I was worried about that. I didn't know if somebody was going to do that. There is no abuse in our family. A difference in belief does not equal abuse. But still, I've heard of people's kids being taken away over this. I'm friends with people whose kids have been taken away over this, or their custody has been taken away over a difference in belief. So it's not an unwarranted fear. Let's see, again, where was I? Sorry.
So you decided to not have this meeting. There was some drama with your daughter about that. Mm-hmm. You said there's no real consequences from the state or the school for you denying this. And then
No, because we had to allow it. We did, because she's under 13, we had to allow the therapy, and we also could take away, the right for her to see this therapist, which we did. We rescinded it. We became very suspicious of the school and the therapist because we didn't feel like they were working in partnership with us. I thought when this all started that was how it would be, that we would be working together. I didn't think that I would be treated like somebody who didn't know my child. Yeah, she's going to a therapist to talk about things that maybe she didn't feel comfortable about talking to us about, right? It's somebody who's supposed to be, in my mind, a facilitator, but a facilitator for the whole family to work together. And I actually have very different ideas now. I would never send a minor child to a therapist on their own. I don't trust them. I think generally speaking, I think there are some that are trustworthy, but generally speaking, I don't. I think it's often sort of that triangulation, that savior mentality that they're coming from, which puts the parent in an adversarial position, and I don't think that's healthy for families.
Oh no.
Yeah.
It's good for the cause, though.
Yeah. So I have very different thoughts. I would never do it again. I would do family therapy, if anything, all of us together. So
this was in the end of 2019?
It was right before the pandemic.
Okay.
So it was February of 2020. And then because it was right before the pandemic, I was like, I didn't want her talking to this therapist anymore. I was uncomfortable with what was potentially happening at the school. And I said to my husband, let's just take her out now. Before they made all the kids stay home, I was like, we can just say it's because of the pandemic. We're not comfortable. So we did. And then it was, she finished out the year with the school at home. I couldn't wait for the year to end. I really didn't want her teacher having any communication with her. I felt like I was under suspicion, and they were watching us. I believe that. I don't think I was incorrect about that. I mean, I felt like sometimes I got, questions from the teacher, kind of just trying to see how things were going. And they did feel a little bit like, coming from true concern, I don't think that he's, a bad person. I don't think that he meant to harm my child. But I think that's true of a lot of the people that believe they're, I think most of it comes from people trying to be helpful and trying to be kind, but they are very misled on how that works. And they should know better. Adults should know better than teaching children that it's okay to keep secrets with other adults from their parents. And even if they aren't, I'm going to use the term that's so controversial now, even if they aren't trying to groom your child, they are doing it because they're teaching a child that that's okay. So even if they don't have some real ill intentions, they're leaving them wide open for somebody else who does. They're teaching that kind of behavior is okay. They're also teaching them that not to trust their parents, and they're causing a wedge between children and their parents.
Well, children and their parents, children and their bodies, children and their friends, children in reality.
Yeah.
It's very, very separating and isolating.
Yes, isolating. And it's also very much a negative feedback loop. The world is out to get them. One of the things, so when I did finally get the notes, that's when I found that this therapist, from the first half hour she sat down with our daughter, was using male pronouns, and the new name. And it seemed like all she was really doing was helping our daughter advocate for herself when somebody misgendered her. That is the worst thing in the world. I know they equate that to harm. That's like, somehow they think that if people don't use the pronouns these kids want them to use, that is going to cause them to kill themselves. And that is the threat that is leveled against parents.
Do you know the suicide rate of 11-year-olds? I don't think it's that high. Maybe it is. Maybe it's higher than we think, but I would have to look into that.
That's a good question. No, I don't.
I don't think it. I think it's probably pretty non-existent. But that's just a guess. I don't think that happens till puberty hits. But so that reasoning in and of itself, the invalidation of their existence leading to suicidality and physical harm, being used as cover to advance this acceptance of this belief system, it just doesn't add up. So you say that they're well-intentioned and they don't know what they're doing, but it can't last too much longer. If you're saying that thousands of parents are going through this, and we're seeing more and more, not just cultural pushback, but evidence of the impact of this ideology on the bodies and mental health of children. I don't know if these teachers will ever be held accountable, but maybe they'll start to back away.
I hope so. I hope they wake up to what the harm they're causing. You know, one of the things that I've said before is I would hate to be one of the teachers who helped socially transition one of these children behind their parents' backs, or even not behind their parents' backs. And this child then went on to medicalize, only to regret it in their mid-20s later. I'd hate to have been a part of that. I don't think I could do it. If I understood that that's where it was leading, I think a lot of people think that social transition is harmless. I don't think so. You know, Stella O'Malley said it's a powerful psychotherapeutic treatment, and it is. It's like it's asking the whole entire world to change the way they perceive you and talk about you like when you're not even there. But it's a big jump off a cliff. You know, you can't just come back from that. And I know some parents have told me, you know, that have moved because their child, after having talked to them, you know, their child wanted to go back on this, right? Like this is a thing that a lot of children are trying on, but they don't understand. It's not like, you know, wearing makeup or changing the way you dress. It's so much harder to get out of because you've asked everybody to change the whole environment for them, you know, and asked them to, you know, go into opposite sex spaces and all of that. It's a big deal. So I think that would be hard for an adult to come back from, much less, you know, a 10, 11, or, you know, any teenager to be able to come back from. So this one friend, her teenager was ready to move. Like she said, what do you think about moving somewhere else? Because she was like, I don't want to use the pronouns or the name anymore. You know, she was coming out of it. But she didn't feel like, she was like worried about letting her friends down, worried about the teachers that she had asked to do this, you know. And so when they mentioned moving, she went for it. You know, she was like, okay. And, you know, I think that was helpful for our daughter too, when we pulled her out of school. And so we're homeschooling now. I knew I couldn't send her to the middle school because I heard about things happening in the GSA club there. You know, there were kids who were peer pressuring each other for, like, you're not going to take testosterone. Are you really transgender or what? You know, there's stuff like that happening up at the school. And then there's, you know, girls wanting to be in the boys' locker room. And I don't know about vice versa. I think it's more girls doing this than boys, but you know, it's concerning either way for the children who are doing it and for the opposite sex kids that are in those spaces. It's not okay for boys or girls to have somebody from the opposite sex come into their intimate spaces. It's not fair. Why? I don't understand why nobody considers that. It's like this minority people are the only ones who have a voice. They talk about this under anti-bullying, but they actually, you know, they can actually be kind of the bully in that situation. And it's allowed and supported. So the other thing that I found in the notes from that therapist were that she was kind of like tallying against us. Like she said that my husband and I misgendered our daughter and that her brothers did, which they didn't even know this was happening. This was only happening at the school. We have relatives that live right near us that she is with all the time. She never said anything to them. You know, this was very much, I think, a social thing, a social experiment, you know, that she was having at the school.
Well, or that the school was having at her expense.
Well, both. Yeah, both. She was trying it on and they were, you know, supporting it. And when they do that, that's the most egregious thing, right? Like the kids trying this stuff on isn't that, like, that's normal for them to do stuff like that. What's not normal are the adults, the authoritative adults supporting this, especially without telling parents what's going on? I mean, it's just, yeah, very, very wrong. So we pulled her out of school. She finished up the year. She had a group of friends who in 5th grade were all like LGBTQ identified. She actually had one that was kind of her frenemy, and they were sort of like, they were like sparring for who was the most edgy, right? Well, guess what the most edgy thing is? Transgender. That's the edgiest one. So they, that was happening. And she was really kind of struggling with that friend group. And that was something I thought she was going to get help with this therapist. Instead, this therapist, here's another thing in the notes. There was a boy in their class who misgendered her, and he got in trouble, and they had to have a session together where he was taught how that was wrong.
Oh my God.
Right?
Struggle session for a 5th grader?
Yes. Yes. I couldn't believe it. This 5th grader got in trouble for accurately sexing my daughter, for trusting his own sense perceptions.
Yeah.
The school is teaching children not to trust their own sense perceptions. And that's harmful. That we need to that's an evolutionary thing. There's a reason that we can clock that instantly, because unfortunately, males of our species can be a danger. Not all, but there are some, and most of the assault and rape and whatever is committed by males. And so, I guess I believe that is why that's, the reason that we're able to, I don't know, there's probably other reasons too.
Well, yeah, that and all the good things that happen between.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not all bad.
But then also dragging in the apparatus of authority to enforce this make-believe, this delusion, this collective delusion. So not only are you submitting everybody to scrambling their senses, but also understanding that the state or the apparatus of authority is right there to enforce if you misbehave, if you misgender, and where else can that lead? Where else can that lead to more encroachment of this state into the very senses of the next generation?
Yeah, they're teaching children to deny their own intuition about things, right? Like to deny reality. That's putting them in danger, and it's it does seem like, I hear, this new generation is so enlightened, and it's a little bit frightening, a lot of the stuff that we hear, about the new generation is so enlightened, and the older people, they're dinosaurs and they're going to die off because they have terrible ideas. Since when do the kids know more than the adults? When in history has that really been true?
If we're the same generation, we ingested media that told us that too, right?
Oh, for sure. The kids, I understand the kids believing that.
Yeah.
But what I don't understand is all the adults that are saying that. Because there's a lot of adults that are like, I'm learning so much from my child. And I'm like,
They get to be, everybody gets to be an eternal adolescent. We're just giving the kids all the authority and
it's crazy. I mean, there are new ideas that come with new generations, and that is true. It's like there is some truth to, maybe there are some new ideas that are better than that are forward thinking. I don't know. But
well, that's the assumption that we've been living with for 50, 60 years now. So since the 60s, we've been living with this mythology of youth as the harbingers of enlightenment and the standard bearers of the new and the righteousness. And it's embedded in our entire cultural mythos. We're all about progress. We're all about progressing infinitely. So it's just kind of our cultural water. I think until most of us don't realize that until we butt up against something that's like, oh, wait, you didn't say we were progressing over a cliff.
Yeah, right.
Okay, hold on. Now you're regressive. Let go of the bungee cord.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's funny because I have actually been thinking, like, I used to think when I was younger, the hippies, like the hippie generation, the 60s, like they were so cool, right? And I was kind of growing up in the 70s, 80s, and God, we were just lame and totally superficial. Although we were cool again in the 90s.
Yeah, we had our
when I was in college.
Yeah.
But I still kind of thought, the hippies were so forward thinking like that. And now I'm like, actually, were they? Or were they maybe kind of self-centered? And I don't know. There's like, that's when all they divorce and you can have sex with whoever you want to. And,
immediate gratification.
Who cares about your, yes.
Yeah.
All of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's funny. I look back on that and I think, oh, I can kind of understand where those parents were coming from during the 60s,
at what cost the red pill when it comes in the potential complete reconstruction of your your daughter's body, right? That's pretty expensive red pill to take. But it's
a terrifying one.
I'm curious about recovery and the steps, and especially if a parent finds themselves in your position, take steps to remove the child. That's one thing. Maybe disconnect them from the internet. Was that another thing?
Yes. Okay. I guess I forgot. I didn't get that part in because she had a falling out with her friends. She threatened suicide and again, and that's when I freaked out and I took all of her devices away for a very, very long time.
Okay.
And by the way, once I did that, she was like, her mood was markedly improved. The neighbors noticed. They were like, wow, she seems so happy. What did you do? I was like, well, took all of her devices away. So, she had probably been stewing in a lot of these ideas, which again, I will say are like a negative feedback loop, because she wasn't happy when she was in this identity. And she is flourishing now. But so the steps, I've been paying attention to that. It's what I was looking for with all the parents that I was in the support groups with. I'm like, whose kids got out of this? At that point in time, when it was first happening for us, I didn't know but one person whose kid had gotten out of it. And the stories I heard were really terrifying and heartbreaking. Most of these parents' kids had gone on and done medical things. And, many of them had lost their relationship with their child. I will say that some of those parents, after their kids got because I've known them now for a few years, and their kids got older, and some of them are showing signs of coming back out of it. So I still think there's hope for all of our children, because I don't think this is a sustainable ideology, and I don't think it's a sustainable way to live. I think I don't know. Do most people come out of cults eventually? I think they do, right? Do they?
Well, I think that I was just speaking with a transgender friend of mine who transitioned when they were a teen and had suffered from severe body/gender dysmorphia since they were 4 or 5. And they are very firm that they needed it as soon as possible. And that the current direction is making that riskier. And I said, well, if it was just located, if this was only, these steps were only taken for people who are certified gender or body dysmorphic, and that could be quantified, and it was contained as not a cool thing. But now that it's a cool thing, how many people are you willing to sacrifice? How many people are we willing to sacrifice? How many bodies are we willing to sacrifice to save how many? Like what's the calculus? What's the trolley problem? What numbers are we talking about? And the numbers are just, with the social, especially in Washington, California, and Oregon, it is just way, especially with the girls, and the calculus there. So there will be people who persist. There will be people. Yeah. I think that there's a trade-off there. I don't think that physical transition is a bed of roses. I think that there's a trade-off, but I think certain people, that calculus favors a good outcome. And that is a very small number. And I don't know how we calculate that right now, especially with the school, especially with where our culture is at right now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, and they're used to the way they used to treat it would be to watchful waiting, right?
Yeah.
With these kids, there was no early social transition.
Well, it wasn't embedded in these social workers who haven't really studied this stuff other than the ideology. They've studied the ideology, the therapists that, everybody's taught this. When I work for Washington schools, and we have to, every year we have to take a course on this, and it's all the ideologies just right there. Talk to the 9-year-old about their sexuality. That should be an open discussion. Agree with all this stuff. Agree. And no discussion about what your family's going through, what the detransitioners that I've interviewed.
Yeah, as if they don't exist. There are no detransitioners. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's tens of thousands, I guess. I mean, at least the Reddit is pretty large. Yeah. But it's hard to know who's in there. But there's enough of them that people should be paying attention, and they are very vocal.
Yeah.
So it's not like people can't say they don't believe they exist. They know. Everybody knows. That's a lie. I mean, not everybody, but all the professionals involved do know.
Yeah. Well, the pendulum is at a particular far point. We know that for certain. We don't know how much further it's going to go in the direction that it's going, or how far it's going to end up going back. But the direction it's headed, at least with your family and the families that you're dealing with, is very destructive and difficult.
Yes, it is very destructive. It's breaking up families. Yeah. Children are taught that their parents don't love them or care for them or want the best for them if they don't believe they are the opposite sex. And, I hear so much about all, this high rate of children that are being kicked out, rejected and kicked out. And it's not that I'm sure that does happen, but I believe that is the extreme rarity, that most parents love and care for their children and have the greatest desire for them to grow up healthy and happy and productive, more than a teacher who knows them for maybe a year, or a therapist who knows them for 5 hours or more. The idea that I know that these kids aren't, the parents that I'm talking to, they're not kicking their children out, but the children will say that they are. They kind of rewrite history. And actually, I think they might get some kind of social clout for saying that, if that's part of their oppression, right? Which is cool right now. You want to be oppressed. That's the cool thing to be. You do not want to be in the oppressor status, which is also, I think, why a lot of, white kids are doing this more than people of color. Because it's kind of the only way, they're not in a good position right now these days. It's not cool to be a white girl, and especially not cool to be a white boy. But I guess there's something more as far as the social contagion, that girls have a tendency historically to fall prey to social contagions. Preteen and teen girls do. That's historically happened. And I know Sasha Ayad has studied that pretty extensively.
It's the way that women socialize and learn about socialization. I think it's called co-rumination, especially when it's negative.
Yes.
They absorb each other's negative state, and they kind of make a kind of little nest out of it, and then they kind of share and resonate or compete within that.
Yeah. So I do want to, I think it's important to talk about like how we got her out of this. I do think that people are kind of hungry for that kind of information. I will say, because our daughter was so young, there are a number of reasons that I think we were very lucky. And one of them was because she was so young and she was not really quite yet to that individuation process. She was still, we still had influence over her, a lot of influence. And because she had only probably been stewing in these ideas for a little over a year, where some of these kids, it's a few years sometimes before before their parents found out what was happening. So because she was younger, because I think we caught it pretty quickly, I had other warnings, such as the friends, to what was actually happening. I talk about some of the kids who I think were like at the forefront of this social contagion, and their parents were absolutely blindsided by this. They had no idea. And their children went off to college and did irreversible things to themselves. That's pretty heartbreaking. And for me, coming into this was also extremely terrifying. But I listened to a lot of these parents, and I, tried to figure out what worked and what didn't work. I talked to Sasha Ayad early on, and she gave me some good ideas. And then I had one particular parent who got her daughter out of this while her daughter was actually still in school. Super smart woman who I just love. But she also gave me some really good advice. And one of them was to be honest with your child. If you're not honest, like, you have to be the one person they can trust to be truthful with them about things, even if it's something they don't want to hear. And that you can show emotion to them. I mean, she told me about a moment when she broke down in front of her child and couldn't stop crying, and was like, basically conveyed her real serious concern about where her daughter was heading. And I had a moment like that with my daughter as well. And it was a moment where it was uncontrollable. Like, I was sobbing. I couldn't stop sobbing. I was like, there are people who are trying to take advantage of you, and I am worried about you, that's when I started talking about the detransition. Well, actually, I did talk about the detransitioners before that. So she did know what was happening with the medicalization. And that was actually she hadn't gotten there. She wasn't thinking about those things yet. She just wanted the pronouns. But I do know that's how it starts with all these kids, and then it leads, all paths seem to lead, most of them anyway, to medicalization. So I had some honest conversations with her. I talked actually a lot about, without really directly talking about her trans identification, I talked about things that were happening in history. We watched a video on Scientology. So we talked about cults. We talked about, Nazi Germany. We talked about Maoist China. We talked about, I can't remember everything. I talked about, when I was having my breakdown on her, that's when I said, in North Korea, they control the words that they use. Like, they don't have a word for friend. And I said, in Congress right now, they just got rid of, you can't use the words in Congress for mother or daughter, sister, brother, aunt, uncle. These are important words. words have meaning, and it feels to me like they are trying to take away words that stand for family, and that scares me. That makes me feel like they're trying to break up families, whoever they are. I mean, I think they are all kinds of different people for trying to get money and power. But yeah, we had some, serious discussions, but this was over a long period of time, and it was careful. Like, I carefully considered most of it, except for the time when I broke down. But and that was when one of her friends was still using male pronouns for her, and she had already told me that she didn't think she was a boy anymore. Turns out she just didn't feel comfortable correcting him, which is also very typical. But so we have, let's see, we did that. We took her devices away. We had all these discussions, and it took, about as much time for her to come out of it as I think it took her to get into it. And I had been told by a professional that might be the case, and it was. So, and she, since then, she knows about all of my activism. I'm honest with her about that too. I tell her that I feel a responsibility to do this because I saw, even though we're safe, and that's a relative term too. I don't think it ever feels. None of us parents, even the kids who have desisted, feel safe. This is still in our wider culture, and there's also always this little like nagging, could they fall back into it? So there's always still that a little concern. The further we get away from it, the less concern I have for that. I mean, I feel pretty confident now. My daughter's 13. She's a couple years away from it, and she kind of talks about it like, she was a kid then,
Yeah.
She didn't know any better,
Yeah. Man, the dovetailing of the loss of parents' rights at 13 when a child just then enters puberty and is in pubescent freefall, when those two things align, at least you caught it before her body started changing and she had to deal with that fiasco, right? So she gets to deal with that fiasco, hopefully, as a female, recognizing herself as a female, and then she can take it in stride. But when that's going on, and then this other idea comes on, and then the state's like, oh yeah, we'll protect you from your evil parents, who you hate anyways, naturally.
Right.
And then we're going to teach you to overthrow the government, because eventually you're going to hate us too, because we're your parents now. I don't know. Going a little further there, but that's kind of
no. I hear you. I do that too. Like, what is all this? What are they trying to do to our kids? Make a little army?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Sterilize them. I always like, is it China? I'm always like, who's behind all of this?
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard to figure out the whole thing, but at least you can concentrate on the material reality and the immediacy of your situation, and then also the situation of those parents who you are working with. Just concentrate where the rubber meets the road and trying to apply the brakes there.
Yeah, and that is also why I am becoming more public, because most of the parents that I know do not feel like they can be public because they have a very real and justified fear of losing their child or losing their relationship with their child.
Yeah. Or their jobs or their community standing.
Yeah, all of that. And let me just tell you, it's not easy for a parent to question this stuff. I mean, our communities are, sometimes often actually some of our friends and some of our family will, kind of give us the side eye, like, are you sure you're treating your child carefully, and be careful with this special child? And, they're like, they're kind of treating us like we're being intolerant towards our children. And that's upsetting. to have people that, previously knew that you were a competent and loving parent, to then all of a sudden with this one thing kind of turn on you. That has happened to just about all the parents that I know. And then more than that, I have to say, I do have empathy for the affirming parents, because and not all of them. I think there are some munchy, crazy parents that are doing this for their own benefit. And, I think, again, they're in the rarity. But there's just so much pressure from all the professionals, from our culture, from our, family members and friends, from the doctors and the therapists.
Branch of the government too, yeah.
The president, So there's a lot of pressure, and we also have been taught as a culture not to trust our instincts as a parent. We've been taught that we need to outsource all of that to the experts. And that's only actually something that I started to realize through this whole situation. I'm like, wait a minute, clearly all these people do not know what they're doing, and I should not be listening to them, and so I question I question the experts quite a bit now. There's a lot to question these days.
Yeah.
But so again, where was I? I'm sorry.
Let's talk about what you are doing as an activist, and let's talk about resources that parents can plug themselves into, groups, whatever is the best first steps. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. As I, like I said, am a co-founder of an organization called partnersforethicalcare.com, and our main goal is to end the medicalization of children, and social. We think there are also issues with social transition of children, but awareness is part of our goal. That's one of the big things. I actually produce a podcast that was meant to be for awareness. It's called The Witness. True Stories of Children and Gender Identity. And that was, I'm not I never knew how to do podcasts before. And, I think it's, if you're going to put me up against other professionals or you probably I'm sure there's issues with it, but for, a novice, I think I'd do a pretty decent job of it. But,
but people are getting value out of it.
Exactly.
Yes.
People are getting value out of it.
Yes.
I do have a decent following for it. And they're actually one of the legislative members in Ohio listened to it and did research, and we're getting ready to do a big postcard campaign with that podcast and Gender Wider Lens and You Must Be Some Kind of Therapist. And actually we're putting your detransitioner playlist on there as well, all with QR codes to send out to therapists nationwide. And we may even do other types of professionals, but we're getting ready to do that. So that's part of our awareness too, because, we all are kind of in this gender critical bubble. Most of the people out on the street don't know what's happening. So we're trying to figure out ways to get that to those people. Billboard Chris does it by actually getting out on the street and talking to people. That's also a great way to do it. But we also make connections with people. So we do have a resource list on our website that has many of the other orgs, and there are a lot coming from lots of different perspectives, and we need a lot. I think they're all valuable. So you can go there and find resources. If a parent needs some specific kind of help, they can email us at support@partnersforethicalcare.com. And we will do our best to connect them with someone who can help them, or we might be able to, depending on what it is. And And then beyond that, beyond our organization, I'm doing some design work for some people. I'm a graphic designer by trade, an artist. I do some design work. I have gone to several different protests. I don't know if you've heard about the one in Port Townsend.
Oh,
here,
you were there?
yeah. Well, so I wasn't. So I'm actually Amy Souza and I are pretty good friends now through Activism,
Yeah, she's
and
great.
I love her. Yeah, she's one of my favorite people. And she's really just such a good, supportive person for anybody generally, but also in this movement. So I actually went there and made dinner for them, and I made dinner and breakfast. Like I brought all the food. I like took care of them, while they were getting ready for their protest. And I couldn't attend. I was actually having major FOMO over this. Like I really wanted to be part of it. Sounds like it was pretty scary. But I had plans. I couldn't. I had to come back home. But I was at the Leah Thomas protests when he was competing for the NCAA in Atlanta. I've attended several things around the country. Yeah. So I'm out there trying to do stuff.
Pumping out the content, showing up, cooking breakfast, getting into a food fight or two.
Yeah. Doing whatever I can, anything I can to help educate people and stop these harms from happening. I'm trying to do it. And I am becoming more public, like I said, because I feel like I'm in a pretty good position to do that.
Yeah, a lot of people have to be anonymous, and it's a double-edged sword because you can tell your story, but there's always kind of a disconnect when people have to remain anonymous. It's not as impactful, and also people can't make the connection. And the more people that do stand up, the more people will stand up. So you have to be a part of the snowball when you calculate when you can glom onto it.
I do. We all do. Like any of us who feel like we can, stand up when you can, please. And anonymously, if you have to. I think the more you I was very anonymous in the beginning. This has been a slow roll here, and I'm getting more comfortable, but it's not being public is not, I had a discussion with you about that. It's not, I'm not used to that. I'm having to push myself, and I'm doing it because it's that important. This is bigger than me. Yeah.
Jennifer, you were on a major television show. Did you want to not talk about that? Do you have an NDA? We're going to publish this after that comes out. I believe that was our agreement. Did you want to?
Yeah,
But we don't even know what they're going to cut out or what they're going to include. So,
that was crazy. So crazy. I have a friend. Yeah. So I was on Dr. Phil. I can say that, I think.
Okay.
I mean, that's already been said on Twitter. I was on Dr. Phil. I can't talk about what we talked about. I wish I could, because I do have things to say about it, but I don't feel comfortable. I could get in trouble. I guess. I don't even know. What did they do to you?
I don't know.
Anyway.
Yeah. I don't know.
But I don't want to jeopardize it, you know, because I think it's important. It was important to say the stuff that I did say.
You said you had a friend. You're going to tell an anecdote about that?
Oh, yeah. She said to me, wow, Jennifer, it was a couple of friends that I was talking to right before the show. And I messaged the women in PEC, and I was like, my hands are clammy, and I'm like, okay, I need you to talk me down. I'm, cause I was very, very nervous. And also the thing is, talking about our stories is very hard for all of us parents. It's a hard thing to this was probably the best time I've had going through my story. I'm a bit more comfortable, but it is very hard to talk about. It's reliving a very traumatic experience. It's hard for me when I do it to keep everything in the correct order. I go back and forth and I get lost, and your mind just kind of starts to go crazy. But so I was very nervous. I was very nervous to talk about my story. I was very nervous to be on national TV in a potentially adversarial, position or antagonistic position. I just didn't really know what I was walking into totally. I had some idea, but, and darn it, what was your
friend
question?
was your
Oh
friend
yeah,
says
God, I keep going off from that. Sorry. Yeah, she's like, well, they were trying to calm me down. They're like, oh, it's no big deal. This is your story. You know your story, and this is the truth. You're telling the truth, and nobody can contest you on that or whatever. And they were just doing everything to calm me down. And she said, meanwhile, behind the scenes, they're both like, oh my God, this is huge, and, but they were not telling me that. And then she said, it's like, you didn't just jump in the kiddie pool. You jumped in the Olympic pool. And I was like, oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Yeah. And you didn't know if you're up against Aaliyah Thomas or, I don't know who a loser swimmer is, but a baby, I guess, with little floaters.
Yeah. Well, you'll find out who it was. It was interesting.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Oh, it was. Yeah.
Do we know when it's coming out?
No, I haven't found out yet.
All right. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a crazy, crazy experience.
Well, bit by bit, baby steps for the children, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm hoping that we're going to get to this point where it's just like, there's so many kids. I mean, not that I want that to happen, but there's so many kids that are doing it that it becomes uncool. I do think that will happen to some degree too. And I do, like, my kids, it's funny, they talk to their friends about some of this stuff and like how kind of crazy it is, but it's like in a whisper, right? Like they're not out there saying it.
Well, yeah, because I mean, they have to go up against the big authority figures at school. I mean, they're criminalized. Wasn't there a case where somebody, I don't know, some kids got suspended or sued
for misgendering.
For misgendering.
Yes,
like
and they're trying to
use
Title IX to do that, right?
Yeah.
Even to, from what I heard, even to reach into people's homes, through the school.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's pretty terrifying.
Yeah, once you start scratching the surface of this issue and other issues, you start to wonder about the state of our country and if we have, if the Constitution that we say is our Constitution is kind of not the real Constitution, if there's not this other Constitution that's actually more powerful than freedom of speech and freedom of association and freedom of reality. Through the civil rights movement, some laws are being used to strip a lot of rights. Yeah. Which is kind of scary once you start looking at it that way and seeing the bigger picture. But we don't have to touch on that. We're just saving,
but it is, yes.
Saving the tweens. Is a tween somebody who's 20 or 12? I never know.
The tweens?
A tween is a 12-year-old.
A 12-year-old, yeah.
Okay, not like a 20-year-old. Okay.
No.
Okay.
Tween is like before you get to teenager.
Okay, all right. Thank you. I never knew because it could be tween-T, but it's 12. Yeah. Speaking of which, your elder is needing your assistance.
I see that.
Jennifer, thank you so much. We can end the recording now. Thank you for your work. Thank you for telling your story here. I'll link all of your resources in the description, especially your podcast, so people can go over and especially parents can get more resources and get connected to your support groups.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for the interview. It was fun.